Welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a recent interview with Minister Amichai Chikli that covered a lot of ground. Geopolitics, internal military friction, and a pretty sharp attack on Naftali Bennett.
A lot of meat on the bone there. It's fascinating because you have this high-level strategy right next to some really raw political emotion.
Exactly. And that mix, that brings us straight to our first point. It's about elevating the political discourse above, well, hyperbole.
You're talking about the Madoff comparison.
I'm talking about the Madoff comparison. The whole segment has this jarring tonal shift when he goes from talking geopolitics to just attacking a rival.
It really was a tale of two interviews, wasn't it?
Totally.
The first half is this, very sophisticated, almost academic breakdown of the alliance of servers, Turkey, Qatar, the U.S.
Right. He's naming specific advisors. He's giving historical context. He sounds like a statesman.
And then, bam, the switch flips.
He moves to domestic politics, and suddenly he's calling a former prime minister a fraud for Riel, Nochal al-Emet, and saying in the business world he'd be sitting behind bars like Madoff.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't that just politics? I mean, he clearly feels Bennett betrayed his voters. If you think someone stole your vote, isn't fraud the right word? Why not use strong language?
And that's the temptation, absolutely. The anger is real, and his base probably agrees. But here's the weak.
Okay.
He undermines his own authority. As a sitting minister, when you resort to that level of hyperbole, you shift the whole genre.
From a serious interview to, a campaign rally?
Interesting. So you're saying by going to 11 on Bennett, he actually hurts his argument about Turkey?
Precisely. Think about it. He just spent 10 minutes convincing you his analysis of Turkish influence is sober and fact-based.
Right.
Then he says a political maneuver is the same as a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. A skeptical listener starts to think, okay, if he's exaggerating this much about Bennett,
is he also exaggerating the threat from Qatar? I see it breaks the spell. He goes from being an analyst to just another partisan.
It does. So how do you fix it? Because you can't tell a politician to stop attacking rivals. That's not realistic.
No, of course not.
So the suggestion here is to attack the policy, attack the outcome of the action, not the person's criminal character. That way he keeps that statesmanlike persona.
Keep the punch, just change the glove.
You got it. So for a concrete example, instead of Madoff, he could say something like, Bennett's political calculations fundamentally misread the electorate, leading to a coalition that failed to function.
Which attacks his judgment, his competence, but it doesn't sound like a tabloid headline.
Exact. Or, if he wants to stick to that business world metaphor, he should use it right. Politics isn't about criminal fraud, it's about mandates. So instead of, his word is air, and he should be in jail, phrase it like, there's a documented gap between his campaign promises and the coalition reality. In business, that's a breach of contract.
Breach of contract. Oh, that's much stronger.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
A political point he wants to make that the government was illegitimate, but it doesn't sound hysterical.
Right, you get rid of the whole sitting behind bars thing. You focus on the breach of contract with the voter, which is a powerful enough metaphor on its own. It just respects the listener's intelligence more.
And it keeps them in that serious governance mindset. Okay, I'm with you. But let's go back to that first half. He talks about external threats, but then he pivots hard to the internal military establishment, the concepcia.
And that brings us to our second point, just coherency in assigning blame.
Yeah.
There's a logical disconnect between his analysis of U.S.-Turkey relations and the blame he puts on the Israeli military.
I felt that too. He spends all this time explaining how Qatar and Turkey have these tentacles into the U.S. administration.
Naming names, specific people.
And then, almost in the same breath, he blasts the Israeli chief of staff for, standing on their hind legs to prevent the prime minister from acting.
He says the military did everything to avoid decision.
So which is it? Is Israel paralyzed because of U.S. pressure, or is it paralyzed because the IDF generals are timid?
And that's the weakness right there. The listener is left wondering, are we stuck because of Washington or because of caution in Tel Aviv? By just listing them as separate complaints, it feels scattered.
Yeah, it sounds defensive, like he's just running down a list of enemies. The U.S. is bad, the Turks are bad, the generals are bad.
Without explaining how they all connect, it's like he's just throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Everyone is at fault except the government. But there has to be a connection, right? The military doesn't operate in a vacuum.
Of course, and that's the key to the fix. The suggestion is that he needs to synthesize these 2 points into one unified theory of constraint.
One system, not two separate problems.
Yes, show the causal link. For example, he could bridge that gap by saying something like, the military establishment was hesitant to act, partly because they were acutely aware of the lack of backing from a U.S. administration influenced by the Qatar-Turkey axis.
Oh, that is so much tighter.
It is.
It validates his geopolitical analysis and explains the military's behavior in one sentence. It changes the generals from cowards to pragmatists in a tough spot.
Exactly. Or he could clarify the causality even more. The prime minister wanted a hawkish line, but the military warned that without American cover, which was being blocked by pro-Turkish advisors in Washington, the cost would just be too high.
That's fascinating because it actually makes his critique of the military sharper.
How so?
He's basically saying the military's calculation was wrong because they were too deferential to a compromised U.S. administration, not just the military doesn't want to fight.
Correct. It adds nuance. He avoids that absolute statement and instead says the security establishment prioritized diplomatic alignment over tactical gains, a calculation I believe was flawed.
That turns a complaint into a strategic narrative, much more sophisticated.
Okay, moving on. I want to talk about when he discusses his work abroad, shifting the narrative from fighting anti-Semitism to fighting radical Islam.
Oh, right. He was very dismissive of the current strategy. He called it Jews sitting around talking about their suffering.
Yeah.
He said he's had more success with conservative groups like Turning Point USA by focusing on the shared enemy of radical Islam.
And that leads to our third critique, how he's branding the fight against anti-Semitism. The idea of pivoting to radical Islam is a compelling hook, but it lacks the nuance to persuade a broader audience.
I can see why he likes it, though. For a hardline conservative audience in America, they might not care about hate speech, but they definitely care about national security. It's a winning pitch for that room.
It is a winning pitch for that room, but a minister represents the entire state of Israel, not just one political faction.
Right.
The weakness here is the risk of alienation. By dismissing the fight against anti-Semitism as just complaining, he risks abandoning a moral framework that appeals to liberals, to centrists, to traditional Jewish groups.
And you lose them. You tell a liberal Democrat in New York that anti-Semitism doesn't matter, only radical Islam matters, and you've lost them, and Israel needs them.
Exactly. He's creating a binary choice where none needs to exist. They're part of the same fight.
So the suggestion isn't to ditch his new strategy, but to reframe it?
Yeah, frame it as an expansion of the narrative, not a replacement. The goal is to show he can make this strategic shift without sounding so dismissive of traditional advocacy.
Yes, and instead of no, but.
Precisely. Let's think of an example. He could refine his pitch like this. We aren't abandoning the fight against anti-Semitism. We are revealing that its modern engine is radical Islam, a threat that endangers the West just as much as it endangers Jews.
That's good. That tells the traditional anti-hate groups, I see you. Now let's look at who's driving the hate.
He could also use a coalition angle more effectively. Say, to build a winning coalition, we need to show partners in Europe and the U.S. that the violence in Manchester or Boulder stems from the same ideology attacking Israel. Our security interests are identical.
That's a powerful bridge. It takes the focus off Israel as the victim and puts it on the West as the target, which is his goal, but it doesn't mock the people worried about anti-Semitism.
And for those conferences, he mocked. He could validate them while adding his layer. While it's vital to document hatred, our proactive strategy must be targeting the source, radical Islamist ideology, which resonates strongly with our partners in the conservative West.
That's the difference between a politician who divides and a statesman who multiplies. It's a subtle language shift, but diplomatically, it's huge.
Finally, let's talk about the war itself. The last part of the interview, he focused on the Yellow Line, Kov Zahov, in Gaza.
This part was a little confusing to me. He insists the IDF is sitting strong on the Yellow Line, and that's the key to victory.
Right.
But then he admits Hamas is still functioning, selling equipment for food.
Then this is our fourth point, the need for specificity in the Yellow Line strategy. He's relying too heavily on jargon without painting a clear picture of the strategic benefit.
Yeah, when he says holding the line, it just sounds so static. It doesn't sound like winning.
The weakness is that for anyone who knows the history, holding the line sounds defensive. It brings up memories of the security zone in Lebanon.
Oh, the Lebanese mud. Soldiers sitting in outposts, getting hit by guerrillas, while the enemy rearms just on the other side.
That's the nightmare scenario, and it directly contradicts what he said earlier about decisive victory and crushing the enemy. Holding a line and crushing just don't feel like they go together.
No, they don't.
He fails to connect the geography to the victory. So the suggestion is that he needs to articulate how holding this perimeter actively degrades Hamas instead of just containing them. We need a clearer theory of victory.
He needs to explain the mechanism, not just where the IDF is, but what being there is doing to the enemy.
Correct. He could explain the mechanism like this. By holding the perimeter and the divide, we aren't just sitting there. We are choking off the resupply routes that allow Hamas to govern. We are effectively starving the regime out.
Starving the regime out. That employs an endgame, a collapse. Holding the line sounds like it could go on forever.
It does. And he should also contrast it with the past to deal with that Lebanon fear. Say, unlike previous rounds where we withdrew and allowed rearmament, holding the yellow line ensures that every raid permanently degrades their capacity. They can't replenish what we destroy.
That's a crucial distinction. In the past, we'd, mow the lawn and leave. He's arguing the yellow line prevents the grass from growing back.
And he has to address the contradiction, the siege that isn't really a siege yet.
Right.
He could say, while it looks like a siege, it's actually an active pressure cooker designed to force the collapse of their civil control, preventing the resurgence we've seen before.
Active pressure cooker. I like that image. It suggests heat, intensity, an inevitable collapse. It's so different from sitting on a line.
It changes the mental image completely. It turns a passive strategy into an aggressive one, which matches the tone he wants.
Looking back at all four of these points, the Madoff comment, the blame game, the anti-Semitism pivot, and the yellow line, there's a really strong common theme here.
What's that?
It's the gap between his instincts and his communication. His instincts are sharp. He's right about the problems. Bennett did break promises. The U.S. is holding back the IDF. The old advocacy strategy is failing. But in every single case, he rushes the explanation or uses the wrong metaphor, and he loses the very audience he's trying to convince.
That's a brilliant observation. The raw material is excellent, but the packaging is flawed. He's preaching to the converted, but he fails to convert the skeptics because he doesn't connect the dots logically or tonally.
And that's really the job of a critique like this, isn't it? To take that raw energy and channel it into an argument that can't just be dismissed.
So let's recap the actionable suggestions for our listener. It was a dense interview, but let's break it down.
Let's do it.
First, tonal discipline. When you're talking high-level strategy, don't lower your status with hyperbole. Swap Madoff for breach of contract. It actually hits harder because it's more accurate.
Second, synthesize your constraints. Don't list external pressure and internal hesitation as two separate problems. Show that the internal hesitation is a result of the external pressure. Connect those thoughts.
Third, frame the fight against radical Islam as a bridge, not a wedge. Don't mock the fight against anti-Semitism. Explain that fighting radical Islam is the most effective way to win it. Use that yes and approach.
And finally, kill the jargon and paint a picture. Yellow line means nothing to most people. Active pressure cooker means everything. Explain the mechanism of victory. Don't just point to a line on a map.
These are changes that don't alter the policy, just the presentation, but the impact on the listener and the voter would be massive.
Absolutely. It turns a rant into a doctrine.
We invite the listener to submit their next piece for review. Whether it's an interview, a speech, or an op-ed, we're here to help you sharpen the argument and maximize the impact.
Until next time.
Goodbye.